All right. So we are live here, and the topic today is some advanced access topics in terms of enums and TempVars and classes. And with an intro like that, I hope everybody's nice and awake and bushy-eyed. We're being joined by approximately 29 people. Hopefully, we'll get 30 here shortly. And I wanted to introduce Ben Clouthier. He'll be chatting online with you guys. He's my co-presenter. Ben is also an Access MVP just like me. He's also a book author. And he's the only book with SharePoint with Access. So please reach out to him. And also, you can chat with him by clicking the chat icon on the toolbar at the top. I'm going to switch here to using the internet, and hopefully that improves the audio on my end. Give me a second while I do that. All right, Ben, can you hear me better? Let me know. All right. Yes, we're recording this. We're going to upload this. All right, good. So I'm hearing from people that's much better. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, I love Access. I think it's a great program. We love how flexible it is and the wonderful things you can do with it. But you know, if you saw my video intro, there's a few seconds there where the master says, "If you can grab the pedal from my hand, then you'll be ready to leave." And so, what I want to say to you guys is, once you'll be able to grab the code from my blog and use it in your apps, then you'll be able to be a master at Access as well. So, you know, we have a great blog where you can download code, and we just reached 30 people online, which is great. If you're having difficulty listening to me, please click on the icon with the phone, and you'll be able to then connect via the web or call in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, I want to talk about TempVars first. You know, TempVars are a great way. They're flexible to store information. Now, before using TempVars, I was using global variables. And the problem with global variables are that if there is a problem when you're debugging code, you have an issue with them losing their value, right? So, for example, if you have a concept called open order, and I'm sorry, if you have a variable called the order status, and that code crashes, then you're going to lose the value in that variable. So the other thing is that you can't use them in a query, right? So if I have a global variable called order status, I can't go in there and use that in queries. So as you can imagine, TempVars overcomes all these limitations. You can define them anywhere in your app. You can retain their value. All right, so you can retain their value when your app crashes, but not after access closes. So a TempVar will keep their value until you close the app, and then when you've signed it up, when you break it, when you go back in there, the next time you launch Access, you set it up again, right? So they're not multi-session variables, and we'll be talking a way around that. And of course, the next thing is you can use them in a query. So the TempVars are very flexible, much more flexible than a global variable, and they're better to use. Now, I use the TempVar for the login. I created this login screen for Malibu Girl, one of our clients. And notice here that you can log in with your name and user ID. And this is the code screen where I use the TempVars. In the TempVars, you can You're having problems with the sound, looks like. If you can hear me, please let me know via chat. If you can't, I want to know as well. But if you can hear me, let me know. All right. So in TempVars, the nice thing about the only thing about TempVars is if you have a field called, for example, username, you need to use the dot value of the TempVar. And so when you use them in your code, just keep that in mind. So for example, in this case, I have 3 fields: user type ID, user ID, and me.txt user ID. So actually, txt user ID is the only field I have. Then you're going to want to use the dot value property of the field to store that value in your TempVar. All right. Let's continue here with the presentation. Now, again, one of the great benefits is you can use them in your queries, and you surround them by brackets. So you have TempVar surrounded by brackets, and then bang, and then the TempVar itself, user ID in this case. Now, when you do it this way, why would you use TempVars in your queries? Well, one of the great ways we use TempVars at Access Experts is when we have a multi-tenancy database. So in a multi-tenant database where you have one database with multiple entities, people log into our app and they identify themselves. And so, well, for example, if we set up a multi-franchise database for franchises around the U.S., each franchise should only see their data, but it's one single database. And so when they log in, the TempVars is set to that franchise ID, and everything is, how can I say this, displayed just for that franchise, right? The queues, the order forms, the invoices, the reports, it's just for that franchise. One database for all franchises, but only you can see your franchise. And then we created a reporting tool at corporate that allows them to see all the franchise data from that single database. So without the TempVars, we wouldn't be able to do this. I'm also going to log in to the online conference number and see if that helps as well here, guys. Give me a second while I do that. So you can hear me from both ends. I'm using my computer audio and I'm using the online conference. All right. Let's continue here. All right. So when you modify a TempVar, you want to assign it a value when you start it up. So in this case, you want TempVars bang order close. Now order close is a variable I created with the TempVar, and I use a Boolean value there, true. And then to remove the variable, you use the remove method of TempVars. And then another way to create the value is using the TempVar as a user ID, bang user ID. And I'll show you examples of all this in a minute. And of course, you want to use the value property when assigning it from a field. So let me go ahead and demo the TempVars concept to you guys here. And when I can come here to the immediate window, and I can say TempVars dot add, and then I'm going to name the TempVar, in this case, order status ID, and then do a comma and then 1. Now you can assign any kind of value. Boolean variable, true, false, number, text, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to add a couple here. TempVars dot add order status, and I'm going to use the text here, open. And then now when I query the system for the value of that order status ID, and then it should return that value that I put in there. So notice that returns that number, and if I do, of course, the text order status, then it returns the string open. So the value of these TempVars can be immense. You know, in the old days we were using constant, like I said, and they would, if the code would break, we would lose that. Not constant, excuse me, but global variables. But with this, that's not the case. So I encourage you to use TempVars in your code where it's appropriate. Like I said, I use that login, and then that's the value of the user who logged in. That username gets stored in a TempVar. Now remember, I also said you can assign TempVars with the bang method. So I'm going to say bang assign equal to. And now when I query the system, you'll notice that it'll return back that value. So you don't have to use the add method. I always do. But you can also use the bang to assign a value to a variable. So now let me go back to my presentation here. If you need multi-session variables, so for example, when somebody logs in today, they use your app, and then the next day they log off, go home, next day they come back, and they need to get into, you need to be able to see yesterday's values for whatever reason. You could use a technique that we use at Access Personality called multi-session global variables. And if you go to bit.ly multi-session, you'll see that post on our blog. And it's read GV and write GV. So read global variable, write global variable. Now you may need a multi-session variable because you want to store, for example, settings in your app. So if, say for example, you want people to store the preference of their color on a particular field, green, red, or blue. You know, so when I log into the app, I always want to see a green. Somebody next to me might want to see blue in the office. You can store that using multi-session variables. And next time I start the app, I'll see it green every time. So in that case, you want to use multi-session. But if you don't need multi-session, then TempVars are better because they're stored in memory a lot quicker than having to write and read from a table. So that's our topic on TempVars. You want to use them as opposed to global variables. Very flexible. You can store any kind of Boolean variable. Just keep in mind the .value portion of it. All right. Again, if you have any questions, you know you can just type them online and Ben will answer them for you. Let's talk about enums. Now, before I started using enums, I was using regular constants. For example, here you'll notice that I got public constant, con order status open as 1, con order status closed as 2, con order status canceled as 3. And I love constants. I use them throughout my code, throughout the app. And the problem with constants is that they can, when you have a lot of constants, you can forget. So that's why I always have the preface there, in this case, con order status. So I remember, okay, I know it starts with con order status, and let me see if it finishes. Now I take a different approach. I use enum. And enum allows you to enumerate constants. Now you can only use these with integers. So notice here on the left-hand side, I have an enum called order status. Open order equal 1, close order equal 2, cancel order equal 3. The problem with this, of course, you can't change the values, so they're considered like constants. It's great for you because it's easier to read your code that way, and I'll show you in a minute. And the wonderful thing about enums is it allows you to create IntelliSense when you do function declarations. So let's go ahead and do a demo on enums here for your code. All right, so I have one already here. Okay, so here is the enums that I declared at the top of the module. Now you can put enums anywhere. Open order equal 1, close order equal 2. So now, for example, if I come down here, let me just clear this, and I ask the system, if I do the telesense order status, right, and I do dots, notice that with the dot, I got my constant values. So I got canceled ordered, closed orders, invoice, and open. So when I select open order, I get the value 1, which is up here, right? So you get IntelliSense with the enum. But it's easier to read, right? So for example, when I do a SQL statement, I say select star from TBL orders where order status ID equal, and then I complete that by using my enum order status dot open orders. So when I use this in my code, instead of using con order status, I use order status dot open order. And it makes it easy to do that. Now another reason also is another reason also is easier to debug, right? It's all about debugging easier and being able to read your code easier. Now, when it comes to function declarations, notice I have a function here called change order status, where I supply the order ID and then the new order status for that order. So this is something that you may frequently have in your app, where you have a procedure that is only responsible to change the order status. So when it comes to this, notice that I define this argument as new order status as order status. And order status, of course, if I right-click and I select definition, it takes me up here to the enum. Now, why is that? Because when you come down here and I want to use this function, I'm going to say change order status, and I supply it an order ID. So in this case, I'm going to say order 1, 2, 3, 4, comma. Notice that I get the IntelliSense again. So this is something you would not get with global variables, right? So I can now, notice I don't have to type order status dot, but rather the actual order status. So I'm going to say open order. So I'm going to change it to an open order, press that, and come back. And open order, in that case, return false. So open order is 1, and I shouldn't return false, should return true. But I do want to display the great flexibility of enums with your functions. One of the things that we also use it for is, besides the code and the strings, and you can't use it for queries, right? So enums would not go into your queries, but other than that, you're good to use it anywhere else. So I'm hoping that with enums, you guys can get into the habit of using it for your constants instead of using a traditional constant. Again, one of the drawbacks is you can only use it with integers. You can't use it with string or Boolean variables. Although you can simulate Boolean with 1 and 0, right? So I encourage you to learn more about enums and using it in your code. All right, so what next topic? We're moving along here real good. We're half hour type of station. We're already at classes. But, you know, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you guys use classes in Access? Can you type in there and let me know how many of you guys use classes in your Access? All right, so I see one person. Another one, viewer 45, viewer 26, yes. And you can chat online by clicking the chat icon. All right, I got quite a few people. And viewer 29 wants to learn. Well, in all reality, you haven't been realizing this, but you've been using classes all along in Access. If you've used Access at all with forms or buttons, you've been using classes. You just didn't know it. A class is an object type. So forms, for example, are considered forms of the form class. Um, the same with buttons or command buttons. They're kind of part of the command button class. And so a class will mean it's an object, right? So we all know forms and buttons are objects. But well, you can also define your own class. So you know how a button has the click event. Well, you can have a method in your class as well. You can call it a click event, although I wouldn't encourage you to do that. And the button has properties such as for color, text string, text caption property, and so forth. And you can define properties in your classes as well. So in terms of classes, think of them as objects. Now I'm going to give you a great example of this. This is probably the most time we'll be spending on this with classes. I'm going to first show you how to get started on a class. And the way you do that is you go to your object code module, you go to the insert menu, and do class module. And a big no-no, forgot to put the option explicit on there. You don't have to type this in. There's an option that allows you to do that where every module you declare option explicit. Option explicit means you must declare your variables. Now before I start creating my class, notice up here it says class 1. I'm going to show you two tables I have in my app. The first table is called companies. And I'm going to put this in design view so we can talk a little bit about that. We frequently use company table in our apps here at Access Experts because we can store not just customers but also vendors and other types of companies. And to do that, we have a company type ID that we define. We use that to define that company. So this is just a simple table with the company name, address, information. We have another one called the company types, which is in here. And this is just 1 for customer, 2 for vendor. So by doing it this way, we have a single table that will hold all our company records in our app. So I'm just going ahead and create a customer record here. And put in some data. And the city. I live in Chicago, so I'm going to put in Chicago. And then you probably have of course, company phone, company fax. And then I'm going to put in the vendor here. And also his information. And I love San Diego. Big shout out to San Diego, although they're probably still sleeping at this time. California. Okay. So I got 2 records in my company table. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a company class. So to do that, again, I go to the insert menu, select class module. And I'm going to start with my properties, right? So a company has a name. So I'm going to say public company name as string. So I want to be able to return the company name as a class. And then I'm going to do 2 other things here. I'm going to actually create an address block because we do this all the time. Address block for orders as string and public company address block invoices as string. So this class is going to return one of 3 variable values, so you'll return all 3 as well. We'll see that in our code example going forward. Now I'm ready to input a method of the class. So I'm going to go to Insert menu again and Procedure. And this time I'm going to select Property. And one property I'm going to use is the company ID. Now I'm going to use this property to initiate the class. So I'm going to supply company ID to the class. I expect the class to query the tables and then be ready for me to return the information regarding the company. So here I'm going to say them str string, them rs as adodb.record set. I'm sorry, I'm so used to ADLB, I'm going to use dial. And now I'm going to, I already have a query defined here, um, where, let me show you the query, where I'm retrieving the company information and the company type. So notice that instead of returning the company type ID, I just return the company type. So I'm just going to grab this SQL code and put it into my code here real quick. And then I'll just break this up because I want it to look pretty. Gosh, I would love to have this new feature in Access where it does this for you, but that's not going to happen. I can't tell you how many times I do this, where I have to format my sex string. All right, and now I'm just going to go ahead and set my record set. And I don't define a database variable. I know a lot of people do. I don't do that in mine. I just use current DB. To each his own in terms of that, but I use current DB and it works for me. Okay, so now I'm ready to grab those values that I retrieved, the company type, company address one, and put them into my properties. So I'm going to say company name equal bang. And in this case, it's called company. I should have probably just used both, but I didn't want to. Since I'm going to call this class company, I didn't want to use company over here. So then I'm going to now create my address block. So I'm going to say company. I'm going to use telesense here. Address block invoice. So for invoices, I'm going to omit address line 2. So I'm going to say company name, ampersand, BBCRLF, ampersand, and then the company address 1, and then I also want to do another carriage return, and company address 2, bang, company address 2, and then finally I'm going to wrap that up with the city stand zip. Now I always preface my fields from the table because address is something that you'll see a lot in the application. So if it's the company table, it's company city. If it's something else, maybe it's the order table, it's order city. So I always preface these. Instead of using city for all my tables, I want to preface them with the object name so I know what city that table is referring to. Which where does a city belong, right? Which table belongs to? Company city, state, and zip. So I believe there's a comma. We need a comma in there, right? And then another space, and then the zip. So here in the U.S., you would format this with the zip. So I'm so used to putting zip, I forgot to put in the company zip. Okay, so that's for my invoice. So I did that, but I want to just copy this and then just modify it slightly for orders. So I am going to just copy that and then just put in address, leave out address 2 for orders. So for some reason, I don't want the address block to have company address 2 when it comes to orders. So I'm going to change that and do Control Spacebar and then just pick orders. All right. And then, of course, always good form to set your RS equal that thing at the end to avoid memory leaks in older version of Access. So now I'm ready to use my class. So let's go ahead and save this class. And I always preface this with the CLS. All right, so I'm going to call it CLS companies. And remember that because we're going to use that later on when we use the class. So I'm going to press enter there. Now I have a class called companies. So I'm going to create another public module. I can use this from a form or from anywhere in my code, but I'm just going to use my public module because that way I can demo this to you guys easier. All right, so I'm going to call this public demo classes. public sub demo classes. Now remember, classes are objects. So I'm going to do two objects here. I'm going to say dim customer as CLS companies, and I'm going to say dim vendor as CLS companies. Now remember, I use the same table for both customers and vendors, but I'm going to create two objects, one called customer of the class company class, and the other one called vendor. And now I'm ready to set them up. So I'm going to set customer equal new CLS customer. Why CLS companies? Why are we doing this instead of saying dim customer as new? I could have just done new up here, right? So we're using late binding. The reason I do that is because if I use the new keyword here, I would not be able to destroy the object later on. So if I needed to destroy it later in my code and reinitialize it, it's a lot harder because the system will recreate the object again. So with using the new keyword, we use late binding. This is what's called late binding, but using the new over here, we avoid that issue. And then we'll say set vendor equal new CLS. Notice that it shows up on my TempVars. Alright, so I created these two objects. Now I'm ready to initialize them. Now remember, I have a method called company ID. So I'm going to say with customer and with. And now I'm going to say dot company ID. Notice that the method shows up there, right? Not just the method, but my properties. I got three properties: address block invoices, address block orders, and company name. So I'm going to pick company ID, and that requires expecting a value. So I'm going to say 1 because my first record is a company as a customer, actually. And now I'm going to say debug.print. And now, nice thing about classes is now you can just do the dot and we use the company name, for example. So I'm able to use, I declare the class with the new keyword, I supply what it needs to initialize, and then I can just use it throughout this procedure as I need to. So if I need the company name, I can do that. If I need the address block, I can do that. So I'm going to do address block invoices. I'm also debug.print company address orders. Okay? Just a wonderful way to initialize your class and do this. And I'm going to do the same thing with vendors. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this thing. And I'm just going to, I use a Mac, by the way. Best Windows machine ever is my MacBook Air. Just love it. That's a topic for another presentation. All right. So here I'm going to say vendor. Now, if you recall, in my table, I got only two records, so I'm just going to supply number 2. And now I have my vendor class, my vendor object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it here. I'm going to run, I'm going to save this. MDL class test. Always save your code periodically, like every hour. I mean, I'm constantly saving in case Access were to crash. And we all know Access doesn't crash hardly, right? Then I don't lose much work. So I'm going to press F8 to start the process here. All right, so I initialize my two objects. Now I have two objects in memory, one called customer, another one called vendor. And then I'm going to press this one. Now, look what happens when I assign 1 to the company ID. It goes up and executes this property. So think of a property just like another piece of code, like a function or subroutine. I press F8. It reads the SQL string into the SQL variable. Goes out there. Now, if I hover over this, notice it says company name IT Impact Inc. And if I hover over the other ones, I should see all my fields there. And if they're not there, then it's because they didn't define their table. Now, it's always good practice to use NZ, right? A lot of companies don't have a second address. So in that case, you always want to use NZ and return an empty string, or even test for that and not use company address 2 at all. So I'm going to press F8 again to step through the code. And everybody uses F8 to step through their code, right? The first time around, because we're not perfect. And that's one of the things that when we test people for a new job, we ask them how often they do debug their code with break. And we're looking for those guys who always say all the time. Okay, so now I set my RS equal to nothing. Now I'm destroying RS here when I do that. And now that I've concluded this, now I'm back to my recalling code. So I'm going to erase this down here because it's going to print the company name. So notice I hover over it's got the company name. So I'll press F8 again. There's my company name. There's my invoice block. There's my order block. So notice the order block doesn't have that second line, address line, right? So just a wonderful way to be able to call the class. Now, when you do this, what happens is you have the class take care of almost everything, right? So if you need to change the status on the customer, just call the class, right? And have the class do that. So I'm going to initialize my vendor as well. And again, I'm going to set my record set. And now when I come in here, it's vendor ID 2. And it's like that. Now I think vendor 2, I thought it was supposed to come back. This is one thing about demos that you wonder about this sometimes. It should have been Acme. So I don't know why they were here. Something ID 2. Oh, I forgot to supply it the where clause. Okay, thank you for that. So let me go back into my class. I'm going to stop this. And when I stop the code, those objects get removed from memory. So I need to enhance this. I will say set customer equal nothing, and set vendor equal nothing. Okay. And nothing is spelled N-O-T-H. All right. So now I'm going to go back into my class, and I'm going to use the word clause, which I'm sure you guys pointed out, but I was too busy talking to realize. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say append to that. And I'm going to say where company ID equal, and here is where I supply the VNew value. See this VNew value up here? That's what gets passed along to your property. So I'm going to say VNew value. So you guys are not hearing me, huh? Let me see. All right. I'm only using one mic. So let me see if I switch over to the conference line and see if that helps. Give me a second here while I do that. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Is this better? Can you guys hear me now? Yeah, we're going to probably have to evaluate this join.me when we do these seminars going forward, because sound is always an issue. All right. So, okay, let's go back to the Ben, can you let me know if you hear me okay now? Skype. Okay. So, quality, all right, so I supplied this new value to the procedure. So now when I run my code, my class code, it should be okay. So let me just go ahead and do that again. So again, I'm just going to step through this. I'm going to hold on the shift key to, all right, so that's IT impact there. And now my vendor should be Acme. There it is. All right. Okay. So the power of classes. Now, why would you want to use classes? Other than the fact that once you initialize a class, later on in your code, you can use its members, right, the properties and methods. And so that's one benefit. If you were to use a function call, then you'd be able to, well, if you were to use a function call, right, where you say, okay, you know what, I don't have to use classes. I can just use a function. Well, the problem with that, let me just turn off this fan. All right, the problem with that is you call a function once, and then you got to call a function over and over again to get the company name, the address provided. So you would probably have to set up multiple functions to do what I can do with just one class and one object. And of course, you being able to use the with keyword with these objects is huge, because it's a lot easier to do it this way, and the code, and easier to read, right? So in that sense, I want you guys to be able to get into the habit of being able to design your classes with flexibility and power. So now let's say, for example, I'm going to add another class method, and this one is change company type, right? So now if I come in here and I say insert a procedure and I pick a property and I do property, and this one is change company type, still lost me again. All right, so let me just go ahead and log into the audio portion of it real quick. Bear with me here while I log into the online conference. 862-367-5900. Yeah. I'll be right back with you guys. Let me just log in so you can hear me better with the conference call. This is going to probably be the last time we use Join Me with the conference, because every time we do this, I hear people complain about the quality of the. All right, can you hear me now? Is this better, guys? Can you hear me better? I'm logged in via the phone, so all right, good. I hear a couple yes there. All right. So again, in terms of the, okay, so I got this, I want to change the company type, right? So notice I got two values, get and let. So with the get, I get the company type back, and with let, I assign a value to the company type. So I'm going to say, okay, again, dim str SQL s string, and I'm going to use the let property to assign a value to the company, so change the company type. So in this case, I'm going to say str SQL equal update TBL companies set company type ID equal, and then I pass along the value. In this case, the new value, right? The new value, and where I need to pass the company ID, right? So ampersand where company ID equal, and then here I'm going to append company ID, which is a public variable at the I defined at the top. Well, I didn't define that. Let me define that now. So I'm going to say public str lng company ID as long. Sound is really quiet now, huh? All right. So better quiet than choppy. Okay. All right. So I've got the company ID up here defined, and now I can use that to over here, right? So I'm going to say company ID. So in order to do that, I need to return the company ID up here in the this one here. So I'm going to say LNG company ID. Notice I have a property called company ID, so I can't use company ID as a public variable. So I'm just going to do this. Okay. And now I'm ready to change the company type using the company ID that's part of the class and the new value here. Now, when it comes to change company type, get, this is probably a bad example, but if I wanted to, I could use the get property to return that company ID. So I'm going to say change company ID, company type, excuse me, equal to company type, which is a public variable I define at the top. So notice I got, I have to put that in there. Some of you are going to do that. Public company type as string. All right, so now I've got company type as string. So again, I have to return that here as well. So let me do that now. So I changed the classes, the procedure that initializes the class, right, which is company ID, company type equal company type. All right, so let's go ahead and try all this. Dying to try this, and of course, every time I do this, I always get into trouble when I do code on the fly here, but we'll just do it. So current db.execute strSQL. So I'm not using a record set, but rather I'm just using the execute method of the database to run this SQL code to change the company ID type. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to show you how this works. So I'm going to go back to my class example, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. And then when I do that, I'm going to say, well, what is the company type? So debug.print. Debug's misspelled here. Debug.print. And I'm going to say company type. Change company type, right? So that returns what the company type. And now if I want to change the company type, which I want to do here, change company type equal to 2. So I'm going to make it a vendor. So I'm making this record as a vendor. So now I'm going to press F8 to run this. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to press F8 here. We'll run this. So now notice that when I press F8 on this line, it's going to go and return that company type back to me. And that's a customer, right? And now when I use this method here to change that. Company ID, trying to get the company ID, and that's not going to work, but see, company ID is empty. So I need to find here company ID. It's running the same property, so I'm a company ID equal, if I could type right, equal strlng company ID. All right. So let me go ahead and call this again. I'm going to go up and then F8. And now I should return the company ID, which is 1. Okay. All right. Now if I go back and get company type, because I need to run that code again. So this is probably not a good example here that didn't apply, but you get the idea where you can use the class to execute methods as you need to in your code, and then enhance it, and of course do a better job than I did in terms of designing it on the fly like I did here. Just a wonderful way to use Access. And we use classes all the time. We use it for company class. We got the employee class. And the employee class is just returning information regarding the employee table. So if you have an application that has multiple entities, right? Like you're most likely going to have a company table, you're going to have an employee table, an order table. An order table is wonderful because an order class is wonderful because sometimes I need to be able to know what the order status is. So instead of using a record set, I just initialize the order class at the top, and then I return the order class, order status back. All right, so that's our portion on classes. Let me get back to my presentation. All right. So, like we demonstrated the fact that you can have multiple methods in the class. But there is a problem with classes in that they're subject to the same issue as global variables, where if you have an error in your app, you lose your class. Now, Ben has a post online that talks about self-healing objects. I encourage you to look at, and he has used that technique with classes so that if there is an error, the class heals itself. So I encourage you to do that. All right, well, that concludes our presentation. I do want you guys to go back online. Please post on my blog, at LinkedIn, at AutoAccess.com, my Twitter. If your feedback. I know I'm going to hear about sound, and that's okay. Great. I want just any kind of feedback is appreciated, right? So that you guys can do that for me as I really would appreciate any favor you have. But we're going to open it up now to questions and answers, Q&A. We have still another half hour here available, so I'm going to open the floor, and I'm going to unmute you now. All right. Anybody have a question for me? Hello? Anybody have a question at this time? Yeah, I'm going to have a recording for the session. Can you guys hear me online? All right, great. Anybody has any questions at this time? All right, well, I do want to say, again, so thanks again, guys, for coming out here. We are hiring, so if you are a access guru, access expert, please consider working for us. Send your resume over to jsoto@itimpact.com. We'd love to hear from anybody who's interested in learning it. And then also keep in mind our sponsors, accessexperts.net and accesshosting.com. And that's it. So thanks again for everybody coming out. And live from Chicago, this was Access Come Through with Ron Soto. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing. They were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were taking back birds, they were taking them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody needs their part. From a painting to a step, when I took it from the hip, I was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. But the boy with expert timing. There was possibility and little Sammy John. He said,